Okay?
Standing will know.
All right.
I think, yeah, people will be coming in and out, I think.
They may. I could also offer this again in an hour.
I'm sorry?
I could offer this again in an hour, too, if...
If you want.
Mary Kay Brown. I'm part of the Mass Association of Councils on Aging. I've worked in aging services for 25 years. I'm an attorney by training. I recently wrote a housing issues manual for training all of our councils on aging frontline staff. That's my job, is to provide training to frontline staff and also try to cultivate more resources so we can develop programs for older adults in the Commonwealth. So pleased to be here, thrilled to be here. As a network, we have made a commitment to talking a lot more often and more clearly about housing issues and options because it's such an expensive part of your household budget. And Councils on Aging help councils. I don't know why I want to move the podium, but I just do. I think it's you. You're scaring me. I'm going to move over here. So I want to thank the Council on Aging, the Friends of the Council on Aging, and the Harvard chapter of the League of Women Voters for putting this together. So it's, for many of you, it's your most valuable asset, and there's often a ton of emotional connection to your house. You know, we're never really logical when we think about our possessions and the things that we keep, and when do we separate from them? You know, is it time to break up from your current housing? But as you well know, often when you have housing in your middle years, your young years, it's not necessarily the same type of house that you need when you're older. By a show of hands, how many of you feel that you have excess housing, right? Housing that's too big. And then, of course, our real estate property taxes keep going up and energy costs keep going up. And so as much as you can love the community and the house that you've lived in, you're probably here because you're thinking about making a change. So when you think about housing changes, there's three main factors that I'm going to touch on in our time together today. Appropriateness, affordability, and then for some of you or some people that you may know, they may be at risk of losing their housing for a variety of reasons. So I'd like to touch on that because you'll all be ambassadors to people that aren't here today. So first, just thinking about, is it appropriate? What does that really mean? Are you happy in your current home? You know, or are you feeling a little socially isolated, a little disconnected? Do you like doing the gardening and the lawn maintenance? Or are you not able to physically do that anymore? Or you don't like having to hire somebody new every year for shoveling or raking and all the headaches? Is that, you know, it's not as joyful as it used to be? Do you have a current concern or a future concern about bathing safely in your shower? You know, is it one of those tubs you have to step over and it's slippery and you're wet? Or is it a roll-in or a low shower stall? You know, have you already made that change or are you thinking about doing that renovation? And then there's just does it weigh you down? How much stuff do you have? I mean, I don't know about you, but I remember you accumulate all this stuff through your early years, you get married, you get all this crap, stuff. And then you get to a point where you're like, no, please don't anyone offer me another headboard. Right? I've got more queen sheet sets for Christmas. Do not give me any more sheets. Nothing. I don't want anything more. So certainly that's often, honestly, joking aside, that's a big barrier to leaving. Because it's a job, and like any complicated job, you've all had the experience with it. How do you manage a complicated job? You break it into tiny bits. I know a girl who was renovating her house, a woman, so she, for the year before the renovation, she just once a week, she emptied out a drawer. And you know, just small bits, and in time, in a year, you're going to be pretty clean, pretty empty. You could be if you keep it up once a week for small bits. So that's why you're here. And of course, I haven't even talked about affordability, you know, the price of heat, your property taxes. So think honestly about why you're staying there. And a life coach would say, well, why are you staying there? Are you happy? What would make you move? Like maybe you'd say, well, if all my friends came one day and helped me empty out the garage, I feel like that would be a good start, and then I could get going, you know. I'm afraid of the cost of assisted living, and I'm embarrassed to go and check it out. So take one of your friends who's not embarrassed to ask questions. Whatever is blocking you, think about what that next step is. And if you can't do it on your own, ask for some help. Because there's a lot of people that I'm sure would be happy to help you. So that's appropriateness, Is it accessible? Does it need renovation? Can you still afford to or manage all the repairs and maintenance and stuff like that? And that morphs into the second big issue, and that's affordability, which may or may not be the primary driver. Hello, welcome, for why you're here today. But when you add up all the costs of owning, maintaining, and repairing a home, it really does add up. Of course, if you can do the maintenance yourself, you can save a lot of money, but a lot of people can't do that maintenance and repair anymore, so they are hiring, and that's an extra cost. And then there's the heating and cooling. Sometimes, as you all know, when you retire, you're at a point where you're managing the gradual dis-saving of all the assets and savings that you saved through your life. So it really does make sense to anticipate in your overall financial picture, what is your capacity to pay for monthly housing costs currently and maybe a more affordable option. FYI to you, there's a national organization that looks into average housing costs of elder households. And in Massachusetts, now this is the average cost of monthly housing, but for private renters, it's $1,050 a month in Massachusetts. Now this is an average, of course it will vary by region. But for older adult households without a mortgage, the findings say that the average monthly cost is $700 a month. So think about that. I mean, that includes your property taxes, your heat, and some other essential aspects. If your housing is above that or significantly above that, then it's good that you're here to start thinking about affordability strategies. And then finally, the average elder household housing costs per month with people who still have mortgages, for folks who may be upsized in their 50s or 60s, is $1,660 a month. So that's the average. So if you're below that per month, good for you. But you still have to be able to afford it within your income. So what are some strategies for addressing these issues that I've touched on? Well, for people that want to stay in their current home, the biggest part is making the renovations to it to make you want to stay there. And for some people, it's because there's this combination of affordability and do you really like your house? Well, if you're lonely and you feel isolated, something that as an association statewide we're going to start turning to is encouraging people to think about taking in a boarder. Well, housemate, roommate. No matter what your age or your income level, you can have a lot of fun with that. Now, I'm 54, so when I went to college and then those 8 or 10 years before I got married, I had a lot of different roommates. And it was a lot of fun. It was great. I was really comfortable with it. But by show of hands here, how many people never lived with someone that wasn't a family member? It's either your family or your spouse.
Never?
Never. Always family or spouse, right? So that's kind of an unfamiliar idea. But that's something that bears a lot of merit. I mean, honestly, that's a big solution to a lot of the problems that you're all thinking about if you're thinking about financing and affordability. Is join households. Find a way to connect with a friend who wants to be that person that lives in your same house. I mean, make rules. Say, look, I don't want to see your mug on Thursday and Friday night, Whatever it is that you can do to say, I want to live with that person and have the joys of a joint household, but also defray my personal expenses. If you want to continue living on your own, then there's a couple ways to make your current housing more affordable. And one is to take advantage of the property tax relief options that are available to you. Across the Commonwealth, these are grossly underutilized. But there is a property tax deferral option that your town tax assessor has the forms for. The annual deadline for that is typically December 15th or 3 months after the town assessor tax bills go out. It's a very simple one-page form to write an agreement with your town to say, I'd like to defer X percent of my annual property tax load. It could be 100%, it could be 75%. It's just this year. You don't have to constantly do it from year to year. And then you defer the payment of that deferred tax to the time where you transfer your property. Because housing and health care costs are the largest expenses in an elder household, this is a tool in your toolbox that the Commonwealth for years has said, we recognize older adults with limited fixed incomes, they need some leeway. Another property tax relief program that's grossly underutilized is the annual income tax circuit breaker credit. If your property taxes plus 50% of your water and sewer exceed 10% of your gross income, so let's say your annual income is $45,000 and your property tax plus half your sewer is $6,000 a year. That $6,000 exceeds 10% of your gross income by $1,500. The annual tax credit was up to as high as $1,050 a year in 14. It will be slightly adjusted higher in 15. So that's something you can take every year. Yes.
Isn't there a rule there that the valuation of your house has to be lower than a certain amount?
It does. In 14, it needs to be less than $700,000.
Right, and that could be a problem for people here.
Sure could be. Yep. And there's also a maximum income limit on the household of $56K for a single person and $84K for married. But good to know if your house value does fall within the max.
Does that include assets as well?
Nope, they just look at the value of your house
Interesting.
and your annual income.
And what is that called again?
It's called the Mass Circuit Breaker Income Tax Credit. If you file an annual, and you would have to file your state income tax, and then it's a one-page form that does that calculation of your property tax and does it exceed 10%. Yeah, sure. It's also available to people who rent, but that's if your rent and the water cost, 50%, exceed 25% of your gross income, right? Because when you rent, a lot of those other costs are rolled into that situation. Okay, so another way to save money is calling Mass Saves and setting up an energy audit. I've known a lot of people have done this, and it's really eye-opening if you haven't done it. I know a couple who had the energy audit conducted. They realized their attic was woefully under-insulated. They came in with the cellulose, the hose and the cellulose spray. And the Mass Saves program, I'm not an expert on it, but it paid, I think, 75% of the costs of the repairs up to a certain amount. So it's funded by the utility companies. It has, the policy behind it is trying to reduce all of our draw on energy. So check it out. Call Mass Saves and have someone come do a weatherization audit. You'd be pleasantly surprised. I did that myself. We have a room on the first floor that's over the garage. I live in a small cape, and that room was always cold in the winter, always. So they insulated the ceiling of the garage, the floor of that room, and it's night and day. So you might be pleasantly surprised. For any of you or people that you know who are an older adult who might have some type of disability that makes it essential that your home be renovated, make your doorways wider, maybe make your bathroom accessible. The Mass Rehab Commission has a low interest deferred loan payment program between 0 and 3% for loans that you might use to be able to renovate some essential aspects of your home. And so that's something that's important to look into. So that's about staying. Okay, let's now get to the new types of housing options. Well, when I spoke with Deb Thompson and Debbie Thompson, I've known the woman that's here today for 20 years. I haven't met Debbie yet. She had a personal, I think a holiday celebration that was long-standing, but So I understand there's not a lot available right here in Harvard, and that is unfortunate. So I'm here to talk about what's generally available. Maria and Pete have developed a printed list of housing options in this general area as a directory. I think they're about to finalize that, or it has been finalized. Is Pete here? He's right there, Pete. Pete, where's that list? No, they have it. They emailed it to me. I missed it. So please contact Pete and Maria, and they'll be able to give you that list if you need it. So let's start first from an independence vantage point. People are often, all of you here, I think, are able to walk around and move around quite well, and you're still very much independent. So you're thinking about, do I continue to own? Do I sell what I have now and rent? I mean, that's an interesting proposition. We have such a bias in our culture about owning, but the pleasures of being a tenant, selling it all, and then just figuring out what your rent is, and maybe that will last for 36 years or 48 years or however much the equity in your house is worth. That's a very tantalizing option. So check that out. A lot of new construction has the type of building that is useful to you should something happen. My own mom is fine now, but she fell and she broke her hip 12 weeks ago. So she went through that classic, and she's not done yet. But 1 in 3 adults over the age of 65 fall a year. Some people fall frequently. So it's very important to make sure to think about the exterior area of your home. And let's say you have arthritis or you happen to fall, you're going to be able to get back in your house. Is your best friend going to be able to bring her wheelchair into your apartment? Think about accessibility. New England isn't well poised for that, but it is an important thing to think about. I asked Maria if accessory apartments are permitted in this town, and she said that they are. You're familiar with those? It's a unit that you add on to your footprint. Now, your zoning laws will indicate what percentage of how big that unit can be compared with your house. And who needs to reside in it. Some towns are very restrictive. They require that the owner reside in the accessory unit, et cetera, and so forth. But that's a way to talk about affordability. Maybe you want to combine households with your children or your grandchildren, have a nice intergenerational thing going, or make a transfer and build an accessory apartment for yourself.
Mary, what's that called again?
It's called an accessory unit. And it often means that you construct something that's maybe 25% in size of the original house. It's connected, but it's independent. It has its own kitchen and dining and living space.
Who do you get in touch with? The state?
Contact your town zoning board will indicate whether or not they permit an accessory apartment. I believe that they do, based on what Maria has told me, who works here at the Council on Aging. So that's a kind of a nice option to explore with your family or with your children who in that town if you want to move close to your kids.
Mary Kay.
Yeah.
Our next speaker is at 2:45.
Okay.
I think we want to wrap up.
Okay.
So we have a little break between.
Let me do that. Thank you. So subsidized housing, you're aware of public housing that's either state or federally constructed, but usually that has a limitation on the gross income that you can have to be eligible for it. But if you are eligible for it, check it out soon because most communities have very long waiting lists. So it behooves you to sign up now and then decide when your name comes up whether or not you want to move there. If you are a person or have a spouse or someone that you're living with that needs supportive services, you're going to hear later, you have the opportunity to hear later from someone from Minuteman Social Services, and they'll talk about the array of in-home support services that you can either hire privately, or if you're eligible for ASAP services, Aging Services Access Point services, they can help you hire in to provide supports to you. If you're eligible for public housing, there's about 30 sites across the Commonwealth that have married the housing, elder affairs, and the Department of Housing and Community Development got together, and they married the housing with the social services, supports, and case management. So as advocates, you could explore trying to advocate for that sort of combination to be brought to the public housing centers in your area, maybe Leominster, Fitchburg, or closer. There's certainly an advocacy route there for people that are interested in it. Assisted living residences, you sign a lease, it is your apartment. You're protected by landlord-tenant law. The services in the assisted living facility are to provide, when you sign that lease, not only are you getting your apartment, but you're also paying a monthly rate for usually 3 meals a day, access to personal care, laundry, housekeeping, transportation assistance. I think there are 6 vendors in the other room from ALRs. Their transportation services often will bring people back within a certain range of miles. I asked 3 of them this morning before I came in here about could a resident from your site get back to Harvard to attend a special community celebration or religious service, and they said yes. They do provide transportation, things like that. But the cost there can start, I think the average cost for an ALR unit in our state is $5,500 a month, and can grow because if you need additional personal care services above what they offer, you'd pay more for a la carte services. They've filled an incredible niche, though, because before they were authorized by state reg in 1995 at the office where I used to work, it was nursing homes. It was either home or nursing home. So this is a nice independent living with supports for people who often either have no cognitive impairment or mild, and then even some of the ALRs have memory care units, which is terrific for people who have developed dementia because of staff and training. Finally, I'm just thinking of, if you have other issues like a mortgage that's underwater, there are services and providers that can provide you with house counseling to rewrite your mortgages. If you or someone you know is facing tax title issues, either they're in arrearage or the tax title has been sold, it's not too late. There's ways to get out of that situation so you don't lose your tenancy. That's a significant way to avoid losing a tremendous amount of equity. I want to alert you to being very careful as you're making your plans to avoid the trap of financial exploitation by kids, powers of attorney, or otherwise joint accounts. Just be careful. Stay in the driver's seat for as long as you can to avoid that temptation. And I am going to be around. But what I did bring for you as not a gift, a parting gift, but anyone who is thinking about they need to downsize and they don't know how, I have a special fact sheet for you because that's really the first step. If you're going to be moving, you got to get rid of your stuff. I'm sorry that we ran a little long, but please ask any questions you have now until they come in, and I will be here until the end of the conference. Okay?
Just for the record, could you say who you are, what organization you represent?
Yes. You weren't listening, were you?
No.
My name is Mary Kay Brown, and I work for the Mass Association of Councils on Aging.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes.
Actually, not so much a question, but a comment. One of the difficulties in Harvard is we really have very little available developable land, and when land is considered for development, the only way it can be subsidized or supported is if it's built as affordable housing.
Yeah.
There's no other state funding
Yeah.
available. And so what ends up happening is when we do have a development, we can't do an assisted living because it doesn't qualify as affordable housing, so it doesn't get
Yep.
into our subsidized housing inventory. We're only at 5%. So the developers have no choice but
Yep.
to either build affordable rental or affordable unattached.
Right, and that doesn't offer
And
you
that just
a new spot.
adds to inventory of inappropriate
Right,
housing stock,
and I understand you have a minimum of a 2-acre limit here?
acre and a half.
Okay, so advocacy within the town to push for those solutions, it's one boulder to all put your shoulders up against.
Well, if the state could consider changing the definition of what qualifies for the subsidized housing inventory, that would kind of change the incentives.
Okay. I think you'll have better success at the local level, but no, I hear you. No, I hear you. Yeah, a lot of towns do resist the allocation, or it just isn't working out as well as
It's
that.
like we don't have a choice.
Right, right. So I guess it comes back to maybe using your asset in a different way, like sharing it, cutting it down the middle.
I didn't quite catch what you said. If I need to build a ramp at my house, what's the agency
The
that would
Mass Rehab Commission,
commission?
and in Worcester is the local office. I think it's called Community Works, but I can get you the name of the actual organization. It's Independent Living Center. If you're,
Do you have the list for downsizing and what?
Yeah. Let me give you that fact sheet. Any other questions before we break up? Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck. It's a good problem to have. You're on a journey.